Hello and welcome to Weekly MTG. We are back from Magiccon Minneapolis, and joining me today are two of the folks you saw talking at Magiccon Minneapolis on the Pro Tour stream about the thing we're going to talk about today. It's going to be a lot of talking. We're going to answer some questions. We're going to talk with you. So today is going to be very much an open discussion about Standard. Feel free to put questions in chat, tag at Magic, and we'll answer them from these two folks who I haven't introduced yet. So in the middle there is Billy Jensen, the Director of Play Programs. And then over there on the opposite side of the screen from me is Principal Game Designer Andrew Brown. So we're going to get to Standard in a moment. Before we do that, I have a little bit of news. So first of all, a reminder that Magiccon Barcelona, so I just mentioned Magiccon Minneapolis, it was fantastic. I had a blast. Magiccon Barcelona is coming up July 28th through 30th, and tickets are on sale now. It says May 11th in the graphic, and you know what? It's later than May 11th. Check out Pro Tour The Lord of the Rings live. You can see competitors from all over the world compete for their share of $500,000 in prizes. You can play in events like the Secret Lair Showdown, the Pro Tour Qualifiers, and more. You can head to mtgfestivals.com to order tickets, to buy badges, to check out options like fan panels, cosplay contest. We'll have a preview panel there that'll preview some upcoming stuff from sets. Ton more coming. Definitely check that out. However, if you are not able to make it, we have two Festival in a Box options for you that are going on sale Thursday, May 18th at 9 a.m. Pacific. This first one here is the Commander Fan Bundle, and you can get all these lovely things on here. And then the second one is the Drafter's Dream Bundle. So if you want to draft at home with friends and feel like you get to take part in Magiccon Minneapolis, Thursday, May 18th at 9 a.m. Pacific Time, Festival in a Box. All right, let's talk Standard. So I referenced the announcement we made in Minneapolis, but I'm not going to assume everyone was watching that. So Billy, why don't you just quickly recap what we announced in Minneapolis?
Yeah, so in Minneapolis, we announced that as the first step of what will be a multi-step approach to rejuvenate tabletop standard play. Starting this September with Wilds of Eldraine, we will be moving from a 2-year rotation to a 3-year rotation for standard constructed.
All right. So I know so people are putting questions in chat already, which is great. I'm going to start writing them down. We also, for those who don't know, we have an official Magic Discord channel. And last Thursday, we did an activation where Andrew and Billy came and answered some questions for people. And so we're going to ask some of those questions to kick things off, some of the most popular questions, because we know they're going to be asked. So the first one and the most popular question we've definitely gotten, Andrew, are around bans. So can you tell this, 3 years is definitely a different rotation cadence. How does that change how we approach bans in Standard?
Okay, so the way we're going to approach bans in this new 3-year window is we are only going to have one banning event per year. This is going to take place before the previews start for every single rotation set or fall set. So for example, this year that would be Wilds of Eldraine. So we're going to make majority of all of our changes to all formats in that one window, probably in like the late summer. It's a huge change. Also, after every 3 weeks of every single set release, we are going to open up a mini ban window for us to potentially make changes if we release something and it has a significant negative effect on a format. So that'll include all formats. But like I said, we will make majority of our changes in that single window in the late summer before previews start for the fall set. And I'm going to be extremely clear on the smaller ban window 3 weeks after a set comes out. That's going to be extremely rare. I think we're going to only use that for, I'll use an example. Cards like Felidar Guardian, where it's clearly significantly negatively impacting a format. So that is our, nuclear button that we still want to have around just in case things go wrong. But like I said, majority of the changes once per year.
Okay, so unlike the current status quo, which is we kind of ban things when we ban things,
Right.
We're going to be more regular with this. We're going to tell people when this is coming so they know and can come prepare.
Correct.
Okay, so what's the reasoning behind this change? Why are we moving to this sort of cadence?
So the largest reason that we've heard from the community is that, we are banning too frequently, too randomly, and it's just kind of hard to maintain your collection and, feel happy to like invest in the cards and say, hey, I'm going to go play in Friday Night Magic and I'll have my deck and it'll be fun. So when we were doing things like that way too often, it was really hurting too many players, and we really want to be able to ensure that people can have confidence and know that, oh, this is only going to happen once per year. And, I can feel confident in, having my deck and playing my deck for a while.
Yeah. Now, let's spend some time on this because I'm seeing a number of comments in chat that are saying something to the effect of, so if there's a problem, it'll take a whole year to address. But that's not what you're saying, right? You're saying that problems can be addressed at these smaller windows.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
So again, I'll use more card examples, like Oko, Thief of Crowns, Felidar Guardian in my head are the two key examples of a card that, is clearly awful for many formats. We would take action in that window. Mm-hmm. We definitely want to be able to leave ourselves that opportunity to be flexible just in case something like that happens.
Right. Okay. So it's not that we can't fix something outside that year ban. It's just that we're going to do the majority of our changes at that year mark. Okay. Now, that said, we just instituted this philosophy. Are we going to see any bans or any action before then? Before what would be Wilds of Eldraine?
Right. So yes, at the end of this month, I believe, Blake, the date's 5/29. Is that correct?
Yep. Memorial Day.
Yep. We will release a update for the standard format. There will not include any other changes to other formats. We are going to have our new normal yearly cadence update right before the spoilers of Wilds of Eldraine start, and we will focus on older formats there.
Okay. So this is sort of a special, we're taking steps right now.
Correct.
We could call this step 2 in the process.
Step 2.
Well, and so let's expand on that a little bit, because we talked about the 3-year rotation being step 1. Mm-hmm. Step 2 is this update to the banning philosophy and this announcement coming on the 29th. Right. Billy, we've heard a lot of questions about play programs as kind of the next step on that. I know we don't have anything to announce, but what are you and the team thinking? What are you working on in that space?
Yeah, so I think to really rejuvenate tabletop standard play, there needs to be regular ways for people to interact with the format. Ways including participating in play events at their local store, or participating in maybe larger standalone events. Those are the two axes we are mostly focused on. And like Blake said, I don't have detail to share today, but sooner rather than later, there'll be more to announce in those in that regard.
Mm-hmm. So we get a lot of questions. Again, you're just ideating at this point, so please no one take anything we're about to say as gospel. But we get a lot of questions about, can you do a new series in the store? Can you do Grand Prix style events again? Is kind of everything on the table, or do you have a certain direction in mind?
Yeah, I think we're definitely at a point where we are looking at things with the top line view. Every type of thing is on the table. I don't think it would be quite as specific as, hey, we're going to have a big standard Grand Prix series. Like, we're not at that sort of level of granularity, but those types of events are certainly on the table. Standard play programs in the store, what those will look like, those are the kind of things we're discussing. I hope that answers the question.
I think so. And if not, you know what? Some people in chat will ask. Okay, so here's chat again. This is going to be kind of a back and forth. So I have a list of questions from the Discord that we're going to ask, but I also want to give chat the option here. So we're going to kind of bounce back and forth between the things. Here's a good question for you, Andrew. What was the consideration for going to a 3-year rotation versus a smaller rotation? You mentioned that players get frustrated with random bans, which I fully understand, but I've always felt that the biggest problem with Standard was that it gets stale as the format gets long in the tooth. Was there any consideration for something like one set in, one set out, perpetually rotating Standard so that the format is considered healthy and refreshed with each release?
Yeah, we definitely discussed. Jeez. All right. We definitely discussed that. We did try this back in, I believe, the Amonkhet time period, right, Blake?
It was in that time period, yeah.
Right, and that was unsuccessful. Many people cited that there were too many cards leaving, and it was too hard to keep up with. Kind of going back to the Aaron Forsyth released an article about kind of why we're doing this. One of the main reasons for us making this change is that we want to kind of raise Standard up from all angles, right? We want to make sure that obviously it's good at the top level, but also we really care about it at the store level. Mm-hmm. And those are the people who, can't really keep up with all of these, quick turn rotations. I'm going to change my, sideboard by 5 cards every single weekend. We want to ensure that everybody can have a good time and just be like, hey, I'm going to take the same deck to F&M, 5 or so times and still be able to have a good time. And we believe that with this set of changes, we are allowing that player to do that.
Yeah. Well, and we know that that's one of the things players like a lot about Pioneer and Modern is they
Right.
can, especially at a local level where you don't have to constantly be on top of the metagame and you can just bring your deck and go play each week.
Right. Moving into that point a little bit more, one of the things we're going to try and do a little bit more in design is have more decks with a clear identity. I think for a long time, Standard's been color, mid-range or whatever, mm-hmm. right? And we definitely want to move away from that. We see with, popular formats like Pioneer, Modern, and Commander, there's a strong identity with your deck. So we definitely we're moving towards more decks and cards that can work together that feel like they have a cohesive identity. Something that we kind of lost when we moved away from the block structure, but that's much more on the forefront of our mind while we're actually making the cards. So you can definitely expect that a lot more in the coming years.
Okay. This is we get kind of a similar version of this question every time we talk about our ban philosophy. So it's a good question. Any chance Standard could go to a restricted list instead of a banned list, like we have in Vintage? And to be fair, back when it was called Type 2, we also did it in Standard.
Yeah, definitely. We always talk about that kind of stuff. I think the most interesting story I'll bring up is while we were, discussing Saheeli Ryan Feldar Guardian, there was a idea for a pair ban, for example, where you're not allowed to use both of those cards in the same deck at the same time. But in the end, it always comes down to just communication, and it is just too complicated for formats other than Vintage, just to have a lot of players have that knowledge of what things they can only put one of in their deck or together in their deck. And it ends up just being a lot easier to communicate if it's just, one card, this one card, you can't use it. Those are the rules.
Yep. All right. Billy, with the increased attention to Standard, how do you allay the fear that this will take attention away from Modern and Pioneer?
Yeah, great question. So to be very explicit, our goal is not to rejuvenate Standard tabletop play at the expense of other formats. Our goal is to raise tabletop Standard play to be in line with other popular formats. We're not looking to take Modern or Pioneer or whatever format play away and replace it with Standard. We're looking to rejuvenate Standard by being additive.
Okay. I will start to answer this question because I've had some conversations with the Arena team, and then Andrew, if you have anything to add, please do. Is Alchemy also going to balance cards that could be banned at the end of the month like previous bannings? So part of this rotation change also further separate. It's worth noting, we haven't said it here, but we did say it in the announcement. Alchemy will continue on a 2-year rotation, and Standard will be on a 3-year rotation. So that will further differentiate the Alchemy and Standard formats. And my understanding from the Arena team is that they are going to do what's best for the Alchemy format. And if that involves rebalancing cards that are going to be banned in Standard, then they will do that, much like they did with Meat Hook Massacre, for example. But it doesn't necessarily mean they have to do that. Andrew, anything to add to that?
Not really. I've had many conversations with them, and they're still evolving their philosophy around what they want to do there. But like Blake said, they're going to prioritize the Alchemy players. So I guess everybody will just have to wait and see.
Okay. I want to circle back to this one because we kind of touched on it, Andrew, but I think it's worth diving into a little bit more. So just to be clear, this one banning session per year is for all formats?
That's correct.
Okay.
It is for all formats.
However, if so, is there concern about how it could mess up formats like what happened in Pioneer with Inverter of Truth?
Yeah. This is definitely the tough part. With the single-year window, obviously, that restricts us a lot more. I will say that we will be slightly more less harsh with, slightly less restrictive with the 3-week small ban window after a set release with older formats. Mm-hmm. So you can probably expect more changes from older formats from that smaller window rather than Standard, where we will, extremely rarely use it then.
Okay, so we're more likely in other formats to use that not yearly window than Standard. Okay,
that's correct.
Are we getting an article about today? I'll answer this one. Are we getting an article about today's information, or is it going to be VOD only? So today is more of a discussion, answering your questions, talking about things. There will be an article on the 29th that will very specifically dive into the details on the banning philosophy. We'll talk more about Standard specifically. If any cards are going to be banned in Standard, that's where they would be banned. So no article today, but a lot of the things that we're talking about today and answering questions about today will go into that article on the 29th. All right. Let's see. Let's go into one of these. Okay, this is probably a question for Andrew. Were the next sets, Eldraine, Ixalan, designed with 3-year Standard in mind, or how are you all, there's obviously a point where you were designing for 2 years, right, and then you shift to designing for 3 years. How are you handling that transition?
So we've known about this for a little while. I can say that Wilds of Eldraine was not designed in mind with this shift. So a lot of what we're going to be doing on the 29th with that Standard announcement kind of is insurance policy for us so that, more of the Eldraine cards and strategies can shine.
All right. Question for Billy. In addition to just events, there have been several questions around things around events. For example, do you plan to revitalize Standard and Paper by doing tournaments with special promo cards or any sort of loyalty sort of program? Or are there things around events that you're looking to inject some life into Standard with as well?
Totally, yeah. I mean, both of those are great ideas. Things like retailer incentives to run the programs sound like great ideas. But I guess the short answer is yes. unfortunately, I don't have specifics, but we are definitely looking at things like that, and even some of the things mentioned specifically.
Yep. I've had a couple questions about why waiting until the 29th. Very simple answer for that. Arena Championship 3 is the weekend of the 27th and 28th and is standard. So the 29th is the first day we'd want to do anything. People have already been preparing for the Arena Championship 3. It's a really big event. It's a big deal to the players who are competing, and we didn't want to mess with their testing, with their play experience. So we're doing it literally the first day after that event and talking about it then. So that's why the 29th. I understand people want to know about, these things sooner, but we're very, especially, Andrew, maybe you can talk about this. We consider competitive integrity a lot when we talk about the timing of these things.
Yeah, definitely. I'd also want to mention that in the time period after the Pro Tour and before the Arena Championships, Aftermath Epilogue, whatever it's called, Aftermath has
Epilogue
come out.
was the internal, yeah.
I get
the Aftermath, yep.
Has released and is in the standard format, and we've already seen certain decks show up and kind of defy expectations. So I'm really excited to see what happens there.
Yep. And Billy, you were obviously a player for a really long time. How disruptive would a change to standard be to someone's testing for Arena Championship 3 right now?
I mean, if I were playing in a big tournament and you and Andrew and whomever got on Twitch and said, yeah, we're going to do a big announcement like smack dab through your testing, I would just be some combination of extremely frustrated, angry, and just not test till after that happens. So about as disruptive as anything could be.
All right. Let's see. This is probably for Andrew. Is going back to 3-set block structure something you consider, or do you not deem that to be impactful on the health of the format?
Yeah, it's definitely something that we've considered. We are going to experiment with, like I said earlier, trying to design kind of with that in mind and try and develop more cards and strategies around each other and kind of move away from that, mid-range soup thing that I was talking about. Because you're right, like a lot of the benefits of a 3-block structure is that you get more of those strategies that feel really unique and have a strong identity. The downside to that is obviously you can only make so many bets there. So like I think a good example is original Theros block, where it's like, I guess we have enchantments and heroic, but if those don't work, I don't know. So we're going to take more of that approach with individual sets and kind of build more scaffolding around maybe a mechanic or even a 2-color pair in limited and kind of blow that out into standard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just a little promo here. We are going to be at Gen Con this year, which happens to fall on Magic's 30th anniversary, and we'll do a panel there that is going to look forward. We're going to look forward like 3 years. We're going to talk about sets. We'll talk about a little bit of that scaffolding. We won't get into too much detail, but we are going to take that long look into the future at Gen Con this year. All right. I've seen a couple questions. Actually, let me address something real quick. I've seen a couple questions about today was supposed to be a Commander Masters first look. And yes, when we initially announced Commander Masters, today was the date for the first look. We did change that, and we did the first look at Magiccon Minneapolis during the preview panel. What we didn't do is go back and update that article. So we're gonna get that updated. So apologies to anyone who tuned in today for Commander Masters first look. We did move that. That video does exist on YouTube. So if you were looking for Commander Master stuff and you missed the panel at Magiccon Minneapolis, it is on our YouTube channel. All right. We've also had a couple questions, probably for Andrew. Will standard Brawl also go into a 3-year rotation?
I'm assuming so. I don't have exactly that information though.
Okay. Yeah, I would definitely visit with the Arena team. They're pretty active on social and in the Discord. Probably can't answer this, but maybe you can talk generally about how you feel about Pioneer, Andrew. Will there be any bans in Pioneer prior to the upcoming regional season?
What date is the regionals?
Billy would know. Billy will check.
Are we talking about the RCQ season or?
The question just said regional season, but whatever the next date is.
Okay, it's like, I think the answer is just no.
Okay.
it's long before WoW.
Okay.
Yeah. But I don't want to speak for Andrew.
Yeah.
I'll let you speak for me. No.
Okay.
All right. Here's another kind of design question, and
Sure.
I'll give a little background here because we've said some things publicly in the past that inform this question. And in talking about mana bases for Standard, we've often talked about how mana bases are managed so that certain sets have these color duels, and then you might do the enemy color duels, so that Standard as a whole has a balance when you want it.
Mm-hmm.
Now that you're changing to a 3-year cycle instead of 2-year, do you think that'll change the philosophy around Standard mana bases at all?
Yeah, definitely. So one symptom of going to a bigger Standard is that the mana bases will just be better.
Mm-hmm.
And with that in mind, we have a range that we want to hit. Obviously, it's hard to exactly predict how strong or weak a certain mana base will be, but I think we're going to roughly be the same in terms of release cadence on dual lands. So, for example, the Pain lands and Dominaria United followed by Brothers War. I think one of the bigger changes you can expect is that we will have more of these utility lands, colorless lands. I think probably a good thing, a good frame of reference would be the castles from Eldraine.
Mm-hmm.
When you have a better mana base, it's also good to give people more options by providing these other lands that could restrict their mana color ability, but actually gives them a strong and fun effect. So we want to make sure that more of those options are available, so you can expect a lot more of that in the future.
Okay. So to confirm, here's the next question. It's a confirmation question. So to confirm, we're getting another BNR announcement around Wilds of Eldraine, even though it doesn't trigger Standard rotation.
Yes, there will be a BNR announcement before the previews of Wilds of Eldraine, and it will focus around non-rotating older formats. So that's Pioneer, Modern, Legacy, and Vintage.
Yep. And of note, our plan is to, one, do those before previews so that when previews come out, you can adequately tell how cards will interact with certain things. But then also, we're going to be very explicit about the dates. We've been sort of surprised, and we tried a couple things like letting people know a week ahead of time, letting people know a couple days ahead of time. So we are now going to, we did this before. BNR announcements used to be pretty regular with every set. And so we're going to go back to something like that so that people can have more confidence on when their decks may or may not be affected. Anything on Explorer coming up, like an anthology or remastered set? I just had a discussion about Explorer on Arena the other day, and I don't have anything to announce right now, but some things are in the works. That is what I'll say. Let's see. Reprint Price of Progress to punish greedy mana bases. Before the show, Billy and I were having a little who's older and has been playing off, talking about just amazing cards like Humility, and
I won the old off.
You did win that. You've been playing longer than me too, but neither of us mentioned Price of Progress. I think both of us generally are victims of Price of Progress.
I believe there was a mention of Stasis, and both of you just really nod your head.
Both
yeah, Turbo Stasis.
Yeah.
Yep.
Every time you mention Stasis, a year falls off my life. So,
Billy, here's a good question for you because I know we've had a couple discussions in this sort of space. When we used to have states into regionals, regionals into nationals, people had 5 to 6 months in which they thought about the standard environment consistently. I know when you've been looking at building RCQ seasons and regional champions, you've done it with an eye towards this sort of effect, correct?
Yeah, so that's true. And I mean, in year 2 of our new Premier Play program, each of our, major competitive formats, that's Pioneer, Standard, and Modern, are each getting their own season. Obviously, I had the knowledge that this kind of thing was coming. So the Standard season will be the third of the 3, starting in January of 2024. Hopefully, will coincide with other steps to get things launched, and the hope is exactly what the questioner poses. It'll give people an extended period of time to focus on Standard, and also just having seasons like that in general, giving the community and players a chance to focus on one format for a period of time, I think helps lift each format up as a focal point of the ecosystem. So I totally agree. Standard is sort of waiting its turn right now, while we work on other knobs to turn and other things we can do. So I agree that I want that, and it's coming. You just have to be a little bit patient.
Yep. All right. I'm going to read this question. It's a little bit trolly, but there is a nugget of truth to it that I think is worth talking about. How long until you go back on this decision? So, this could be a reference to when we shortened standard rotation and then back that off. Could be reference to other things, but look, the reality is that we are constantly taking in data and feedback and working to do what is best for the format and for the players. And sometimes we get new data in. So let's use the 18-month rotation as an example. So when we did that, we were trying to do something sort of similar in speeding up standard so that it felt constantly fresh and constantly new. And when we implemented that, we found out that while we received that feedback that was what players wanted, their actual actions after we implemented it did not match that desire. So people stopped playing standard, they fell off. For that reason, that helped inform this decision, going to 3 years, because we learned during that period of time that players didn't want their cards to rotate off that fast, and they did want to play with things with some consistency. So this is, again, one piece of the puzzle. We do change our minds sometimes, and I think that that's actually a strength rather than a weakness, because we're willing to admit when something doesn't work, or when we find a better way. So I don't mind the question. All right, I'll ask. I don't have an answer for this, but I'll ask it because it's from Fire Shoes, and we will answer whatever Fire Shoes wants. When do previews for WoW start? I don't remember off the top of my head. I want to say August 15th. I might be making that up. So don't take that as gospel, but I feel like that is... I feel like that's the right space, but I could be wrong.
We'll have that date in the article releasing later this month, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. On the 29th, we will say when the exact date of the non-rotating, rotating BNR announcement is. All right. Question for Andrew. How do you feel about the top deck in both Pioneer and Standard being so similar? So Rakdos mid-range essentially in both formats is one of the top decks.
I mean, clearly not the best. Like, obviously, when you move to different formats, you want to have a different play experience. That's what one of the general strengths of Magic is, that there are so many different ways to play it. So to your answer, I think it's just flatly no. Like, we want to be able to have people change formats, have a totally different experience, right? So I guess easy answer. There you go.
Let's see. I think we already talked about that. there's a number of questions around accessibility of cards. When you enter a 3-year cycle, you get further and further away from the cards that were printed at the start. So, first to answer the question, no, we're not. At least we don't have anything to announce right now for challenger decks for the rest of the year. However, have you all started talking in that sort of space about challenger decks, reprints for cards that are in standard, and anything in that product space, Andrew?
Yeah, it's definitely a conversation we're having a lot. Like I said, this change is to lift standard up from all angles. And we feel like the angle standard is weakest at is kind of, at that local level. So I think products like that do a ton of work to help that specific player. So, those conversations are happening, are evolving, and are a priority.
All right. Billy, will the standard RCQ season coincide with a set release, or will that season last through multiple set releases?
I have to check the set release. I know the standard season starts in January. I don't know what we've announced, so you tell me, Blake.
Just tell me how long the season runs, and I'll answer the question.
January to March is the RCQ season, January through March.
Oh, we have not announced. I will say we have not announced anything past Lost Caverns of Ixalan, which is in that window, but we have not announced anything past that. All right, let's see. So I think this is an interesting question because I know in the meeting we had on Friday, Andrew, we talked about interaction and different archetypes. So maybe you can expand beyond this question a little bit, but it's a good place to start. Do you think increasing the power of interaction, especially counterspells, could help make standard more popular again when interaction was the focus versus threats?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. To answer the exact question, we have been examining our counterspells over the past couple years, and they've been a little lackluster. I think a lot of weight is put on negate. That's a rhyme. And we are looking to improve a lot of that kind of interaction in the future. I think in the next year you'll definitely see a increase on that front. But in general, right now interaction is kind of at a strong point. When we see kind of the cut down plus go for the throat squeeze, it's difficult to figure out which creatures to play. So it ends up being you want to play more creatures that have immediate value that aren't totally blanked, or you don't get that much if they're removed immediately. Those are cards like obviously Fable of the Mirror Breaker and kind of Blood Tithe Harvester gives you blood, Reckoner Bankbuster can be a creature and then gives you cards as well. So we definitely want to move towards a place where playing a creature and untapping with it is a strong thing to do. So that also dovetails in with the interaction point conversely, but it's a really delicate balance. It's a hard thing to predict. So I guess that's not really an answer. It's more just kind of a wait and see, and just know that we constantly think about that all the time.
Yeah.
In the vein of the old man conversation, can we get mana drain in standard?
Oh, mana drain in standard. Okay. Ooh, what's a really good answer?
It was mana drain, humility.
Oh, you got ideas too, Blake? Let's hear them.
I do, yeah.
Let's hear them.
Stasis.
Okay,
Tinker.
Stasis.
Yeah, Tinker. Stone Rain. We printed Stone Rain a lot. That's just good, clean magic. Let's just get that.
If you ever
right
looking
back
for
in.
a team swap, we got room for you.
Abeyance. Just make Abeyance great again.
That's false. We have no room for you.
All right. So since this is, I'll take this next one. So since this is basically an announcement of announcement, when will the majority of information about the standard overhaul be coming out? I'll answer this in two parts. So the announcement of an announcement thing. So we're trying to think of this more as a discussion. So one of the reasons that when Billy announced this at Magiccon Minneapolis, that he used the the language that it's the first step is because this really is. Like, this is a process. This isn't just, all right, 3 years, we're good. Standard's great now. That wasn't the intention. This is a process, and it's a conversation. That's why we did the Discord Q&A last Thursday. That's why we're doing this now. To answer the second part of your question, it's why we'll have the article coming on the 29th. And we'll certainly have more points of contact and discussion as we go along. When Billy's team is ready to roll out their new programs, Billy, I'm sure, will come back on and talk about those. When we hit that Wilds of Eldraine non-rotation moment with the ban, I'm sure Andrew and his crew will come back to talk more there, and we'll find more places in between to talk. So this is really a discussion. It's not. We're trying not to just throw information at you, but take your feedback and questions as well. But to answer the second part of your question, May 29th. Let's see. Let's see. For people asking about Lord of the Rings, we will be back on May 30th with the debut. So for the Lord of the Rings, Tales of Middle-earth, the debut will be on May 30th, and we'll even have a debut after show as well. I think we've clarified that. Speaking about discussions, when will we get back to the arena economy? I'll chat with the arena team. Let's see. I think. All right, Billy, see how you want to answer this question. How many players do you, well, it's pretty technical and detaily, so not sure how deep you can get into it, but sure. How many players do you want in American RCs? How many qualify for the PTs they feed into? Last year's in Georgia was 900 plus people with the top 48 qualifying. Do you have a percentage in mind?
Not really. I mean, I hope that so to be clear, I hope that all facets of our system in all regions are showing growth. RCQs, RCs. I definitely don't have like a target number, a target percentage. It's not exactly how I think about things. It's going to be very hard for me to be more descriptive than that right now and on this call. But yes, I hope more stores are having RCQs, which will cause the RCs to grow. I hope more people are playing in those RCQs, which will cause them to grow. And I hope that's true everywhere, not just the United States.
Mm-hmm. Question for Andrew. Can most of Standard's challenges be attributed to a lack of conditional 2/4s with LifeLink? I'm laughing and like 3 people get that question.
Oh, because Jorah by Merklurker. Yeah. I think we can attribute a lot of that to that. So, okay. It blocks the Fable token. So good. Yeah. Doesn't get cut down.
Yeah, there you go.
Perfect card.
It's perfect card, no notes. All right, here's 2 more serious design questions. Sure. Will there be an emphasis on printing more Bane Slayers, like Shuldred, or fewer spells like Cut Down that punish unique 2 to 3 mana creatures? And then related, 2 drops seem to be lackluster in favor of 3 and 4 drops. Can they be juiced a bit, please?
We recently had this discussion about 2 drops to where we were talking about like the mana exchange. And, currently we see that, Cut Down is providing that really powerful mana exchange against 2 mana creatures. So I think I generally agree with the note. It's something that we've considered in the future design, and I guess you'll just kind of have to wait and see on that one. What was the first part of the question again, Blake?
Will there be more Bane Slayers printed? So big creatures with outcomes and play abilities,
Yeah, for clarity, I guess Bane Slayers, internally we use it as a term meaning creatures where you have to untap to kind of achieve their maximum potential. Will you see more of those cards? Hard to say. I don't think we've made a specific push towards those cards. I think it's a lot easier for those cards to shine when we are more deliberate with our removal suite and removal packages. To which case, you have those moments where, yes, Bane Slayer does get played. You don't have an answer. The game's over in 3 or 4 turns, right? But we also want to have those moments where somebody has the Bane Slayer and then somebody has that right, piece of removal that specifically answers that card. So obviously we want both of those scenarios to happen. And it just comes down to us, thinking about which cases more often, which case we want to win out more. And it's a combinatorics little spider web thing that you have to figure out. That's my answer.
Yeah, that's fair. It's complicated. I totally lost the question, and it was a good question. I'll paraphrase the question. So if we come to that yearly standard ban window, and the format is good, would you automatically ban cards anyway to shake things up, or would you leave things as they are if people are having fun?
We would leave it as it lies.
Okay. Similarly, are you keeping open the scope to unban cards during the window too?
During the yearly window, yes. One thing I forgot to mention earlier is that when we are considering bans, we will more heavily consider cards that have been legal for longer. So with that question in regards to unbannings, I would say unbannings in standard are a little less, would be less frequent in this new yearly model. So again, reiterating, we are generally going to take a closer look or be more liberal and taking action against cards that have been legal for longer within the standard format. Should have said that earlier.
Let's see. Question for Billy, which you may or may not be able to answer. Can you address the premium stores running RCQs moving away from the 2-slot events to 1-slot event due to the cost increase for them to host a 2-slot event?
No, I mean, this is specific to one partner and not even, the RCQ systems are managed by partners and it's not standardized worldwide. So speculating about one region's RCQs is not really something I'm prepared to do in the scope of this conversation.
Okay. Andrew, interesting question. I've seen a few variations about this while people talking about online. So it's pretty well known that we did core sets for a while. We stopped doing core sets. We started doing core sets again, then we stopped doing core sets. But a lot of players point to the reprints in them as being useful for managing a format. This question is, would you consider making micro sets like the Aftermath as core sets instead?
To address the core set note, as you can tell based on our product line within the past 5 years, we always have the discussion on what is the best way to path people into our game. And core set, being simpler makes it easier for people to learn the game. So that's constantly a discussion that we're having in terms of how do we best, which sorts of products are best to get people into our game. And one conversation that we've been having more and more recently is how do we path more people into starting players into standard, because it is the format where you need to own the least older cards or more difficult cards to acquire. So that's constantly on our mind, and we are thinking about products that would do that the best. I think that's all I can really say. Just know that it's top of mind and a priority for us.
Okay. Billy, when will there be limited added to the RC level?
I have nothing to announce on that front.
Nothing to announce yet on that front. but also just nothing too nuts. Let's see. Andrew, will
Sure.
you ever unban some of the banned cards in Historic? Is that something you would consider?
I don't actually manage the historic format, so you'll have to ask the arena team? Question mark.
Let's see. See if they're. I'm seeing a lot of great questions in chat. We have answered some of them before, so I'm trying to make sure that we get to unique questions. Let's see. Andrew, you may or may not be able to answer this.
Sure.
Have you guys considered putting some core set staples in Jumpstart?
Yes, we actually have considered that. I think one of the main reasons we've shied away from that is just simplicity of communication, and also accessibility. Like, it would be great to put, staple cards we don't want to print in our main sets into Jumpstart. But I think at the end of the day, it just gets too hard to track what's exactly legal and standard. And like I said earlier, this push is to make sure that, we can get more people into standard. So we want to be able to simplify things. So, adding legality of smaller sets that, typically wouldn't have been in standard and putting cards that are relevant for that format in those products, I don't think is a great idea. But know that we have considered it. Yeah.
All right. Will this stream be on YouTube later? Yes, it will be.
Hello, Mom.
Yes, it will. For either of you, was a 4-year standard rotation ever considered, or only 3-year?
Want
I'll
me to
take that one. Yeah, I'll take that one. We didn't distinctly consider 4 years. At that point, I think things get too similar to Pioneer, given where those dates are exactly, or where those set dates are in terms of size of the format. Like I said earlier, it's important that formats feel distinct. So I think if we went farther back, I think things kind of do tend to be a little bit more samey. So with the 3-year rotation, we hope to kind of like expand the format, but also don't get it too close to Pioneer at the same time. Because, again, one of Magic's strengths is that you can choose the way you want to play. There's so many different formats and so many different ways to express yourself and play. So you want to keep those distinct and unique.
All right. Billy, I'm going to pass this one to you. I think we've talked about parts of this, but it's a good question. So let's chat.
Okay.
A lot of these points improve standard as it is now, but don't really address paper specifically. We've said a number of times that this is aimed at tabletop paper play. What measures are aimed more towards improving paper standard particularly rather than standard generally?
Yeah, great question. That's sort of what we were talking about when we said this is a multi-step process. We do feel that this step, or these steps that we've talked about so far, like the question states, these steps are more about standard as a format and not so much about tabletop. Play programs, events, things of that nature, seasonal focal points, things like that, I think and we think are going to do more, I guess, for tabletop relative to standard overall than these first two things, which I do think that the rotation does help tabletop a little bit more, just in terms of, an investment into standard cards and decks. But I agree that events and play programs vastly disproportionately benefit tabletop compared to these first couple steps.
Yep. All right, Andrew, we're not going to talk specifics about future sets, but maybe you can talk towards this philosophy. With the extra year for standard cards and with the team usually working a year behind, can we expect micro sets of cards updating mechanics like Toxic and Knights a year from now to give them juice if needed to make them viable? So maybe you talked a little bit about this on the announcement, but maybe you can expand on your process and building cards into standard.
Right. So it's doubtful that we'll re-release a mechanic into 3-year standard. Let's say there's a mechanic in the final year of standard and in the newest year of standard. It's unlikely that we'll re-release a mechanic there to kind of enhance that deck. One thing that you can expect us to do is to specifically design cards for those decks in their final year to maybe prop them up if they've lost something. So for like a good example probably would be like maybe when a specific protection spell rotates out from the Toxic deck, it would be, that's something that we would look at and be like, hey, do we want to re-add something there to kind of fill that hole because we do think it'll be too weak without it. So that's more of the line you can expect from us in terms of kind of looking backwards at cards. And it is going to be a lot easier for us because with a 3-year rotation, we'll actually be able to see a year worth of cards actively in the environment. So we'll actually have a lot more precision and we'll actually know what cards we actually have to design against, because previously in the 2-year standard window, we would design the entire format without ever seeing any of the cards actually out in the wild. So this actually also makes it easier for us, and I think overall we'll be able to get a better format from it.
Okay. Andrew, so you touched on this when talking about cut down and go for the throat. So one of the things danced around is that black has the best interaction in standard, but white, blue, and green have weaker interaction, and then they name a few. What is the plan to balance this out?
Well, I will say first off that black should have the strongest interaction for creatures. It is, that is its share in the color pie. One thing I think that we're unhappy with right now is how black is pushing out other card types more than it should. So I think one of the prime examples would be Invoke Despair against enchantments and planeswalkers. So when that card is very strong, it's a lot harder to play enchantments and planeswalkers and kind of diversify up your game plan, which would be generally strong against 1-for-1 removal like Cut Down and Go for the Throat. So I think, that's more of the issue instead of, black being the strongest. It should be in terms of single target removal. It's just more of that extra coverage that we're worried about.
Okay. Are digital formats like Alchemy affected by this new banning schedule, or would it be on a different timeline and balancing?
Yeah, Alchemy is going to be on a 2-year release. I believe the Arena team is still figuring out their philosophy around Alchemy bans. I think you can probably expect some articles from them soon discussing that. So I would just wait and see for that.
All right. Okay, I think we have covered all the questions that we're able to ask. That's not to say that some of the questions in chat aren't good questions, but also we only have 2 minutes left. And so appreciate you, Billy and Andrew, for taking the time to answer people's questions. Chat, thank you for tuning in and asking some great questions. This is the start of a discussion that we've been having now for a week and a half, and we're going to keep having it. So the next touch point is going to be May 29th, where we'll have an article that will talk about philosophy of standard, and if there are going to be any changes to standard, they'll happen at that point in time. Next week is going to be a fairly relaxed stream. It's just going to be me hanging out, probably getting a lot of these questions again, and happy to chat about them. But thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next week.